So the federal government is investing $420 million into Canada's second largest steel producer, Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. The goal is to help reduce the company's carbon emissions. Ottawa says it will cut greenhouse gas emissions by 3 million metric tons per year by 2030. That's equivalent to taking 900,000 cars off the road, according to the federal government. Michael McQuaid is the CEO of Algoma Steel Inc. Michael McQuaid, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So $420 million from the federal government. How will that money allow you to transform your operations?
So it's a significant component of the $700 million that is required to transform our operations to electric arc. So by its sheer size, the 420 helps facilitate that we've got the capital to make this conversion to electric arc steel technology.
Okay, electric arc steel technology, for people who aren't in the steel industry and aren't into electric arc furnace steel making, how does that change your operations? What kind of a transition are we talking about here?
So let's start with the integrated model, which is the alternative to electric arc steel making. The integrated model uses coal turned into coke as the fuel to reduce iron ore pellets to a molten state. And then that liquid iron is transferred over to a basic oxygen furnace where alloys, reagents, and oxygen are used to superheat and turn that liquid iron into steel. In the electric arc technology, we jump right to the steelmaking process, no longer using coal to generate coke and no longer using that coke as a fuel in a blast furnace. And we use electricity pass through electrodes as the energy to take the scrap metal and return it to a molten state or liquid state.
Okay, so rather than using coal to generate the heat you need to transform the metals to make the steel, you're now just going to use whatever the electricity supply is that you can plug into. And this will have a significant reduction in your emissions by, I believe, 70%. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. There's approximately 3 million tons of CO2 and some other environmental materials that will eliminate as we move to electric arc technology.
So this $420 million that you're getting from the Net Zero Accelerator and also from things like the Infrastructure Bank, how much of that is a loan and how much of that is a grant for your company?
We're looking at it right now as 100% loan, repayable to the federal government and the SIF fund.
And some of that becomes forgivable if you hit emissions targets? Is that how it works?
There are some terms in there that are favorable, and yes, obviously, with respect to the carbon reduction.
So how would that work, sir? Like, is it tied to a percentage of what the targeted emission reductions are? A percentage of it becomes forgivable, or can you give us those details?
It's flexible at this time, and the reason being is that really it's a period of time of when we achieve the carbon reduction, and there's still significant work to be done on the timing associated with the project.
So what does this mean for your operations at Algoma, and what does it mean for your employees? Because heavy industries like yours, which are big emitters, obviously they lose some competitiveness with the way the world is going and become less attractive with the way the world is going. What will this transformation mean to the competitiveness and the longevity of your operations?
I think it's significant. It's significant to our employees. As you point out, it's important and becoming increasingly important that climate is addressed. So as that factors into the decision making in the future of materials, the fact that we are going to be one of the greenest, if not the greenest steelmaker is going to bode well for us. Let me back up. The fact that the electric arc technology is cost effective, we're going to have a construction period with significant jobs. So Sault Ste. Marie is going to benefit during the construction period. I would also suggest that that the model of using electric arc technology and the sustainability, coupled with the price of carbon that looks like it will only increase going forward, would have us really becoming a much more sustainable steelmaker, and in my mind, securing steelmaking jobs in Sault Ste. Marie for generations to come.
I've never built an electric arc furnace or seen one make, but I don't imagine they're quick jobs. So how long will this transformation take, and how long will it be before you're able to achieve those massive emission reductions that you're hoping to get out of this change?
So our construction period, including engineering, is going to be approximately 30 months. And we've got up to 4 years. So there's a period that we also have, we'll call it the commissioning phase. So from there, we'll be ramping up and realizing the benefits. But we'll start at 30 months and then grow through the commissioning to electric arc technology.
So this will reduce emissions at your facility by 3 million metric tons by 2030, which is a significant amount. I believe the Prime Minister and others said today that's the equivalent of taking 900,000 cars off the road. So it's a 70% reduction. Is net zero achievable in the steel industry? What would you have to do to get rid of that, to balance out that other 30%, or can you?
Well, in the steel sector, net zero is still seen as an aspirational goal by 2050. Let's put it this way: electric arc technology, combined with the greenness, if you like, of the Ontario electricity grid, makes that significant contribution. So the balance remains to be seen as technology evolves, and but we look at it as the most significant step. And if we can take a 70% reduction this quick, that leaves us some time to look at the other alternatives and technology that would bridge the gap to achieve that aspirational goal of net zero by 2050.
So based on where things stand right now, it's strictly aspirational. It's likely if you had to commit to a plan at this point in time, other sectors might have to make up for that simply based on just the nature of the steel industry itself. Is that correct?
There's no doubt that industry, working with government, working with academia, are going to have to continue to look at technologies that will help us bridge that last 30%.
Okay. Michael McQuaid, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to get some more insight into how this could impact Canada's carbon emission goals. Catherine Abreu is the Executive Director of the Climate Action Network Canada, and she is in Ottawa. Catherine, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
How significant is this announcement in your view when it comes to reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
So there are a couple ways that we can judge this announcement. One is, as you suggest, sort of purely from the perspective of greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And from that perspective, it's significant. You know, industry is one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases in Canada. The steel industry is really carbon intensive. And so making this move from coal to electricity to reduce those emissions by 3 million tons a year, as you've said, taking 900,000 cars off the road every year is significant. But we can also look at it from the perspective of the kind of broader economic transformation agenda toward a clean economy. And I think from that perspective, there are some really good wins here and also some lessons that we can learn for how we might be able to do this kind of thing a little bit better and with a more transformative impact in the future.
Okay, I want to touch on both of those points. Well, I want to start with the emissions metric right off the bat. 3 million metric tons, 900,000 cars. Is that believable? Is that a true number in your sense when you look at the emissions of the heavy steel manufacturers?
Yeah, I buy it. So for sure, we know that steel is very greenhouse gas intensive. This is the second largest steel manufacturer in Canada, so their emissions footprint is large. They're one of the largest industrial emissions footprints in the country. And so for sure, transforming them, reducing their industrial emissions by 70% will make a huge impact in Canada's emissions inventory. And so I think the question on that front is, okay, so how do we now move to decarbonizing the entire sector? What does this mean for the other steel manufacturers in Canada? And how do we make sure that that entire industrial sector is engaging in this kind of transformation?
Well, so how does the country do that? I mean, there's $420 million in public money here through the Net Zero Accelerator, through the Infrastructure Bank and these things. I mean, is this the way to use things like the Net Zero Accelerator for the big, because it's tough for dirty industry to get money right now, right? Given the way the world is going. Is this the way we should be doing it as a country?
Yeah, I think that's really the question that we need to be asking, David. The Net Zero Accelerator Fund is a program that is basically a kind of a proposals program. So it says, facilities, you give us a proposal of how you're going to reduce emissions, and then we'll determine what kind of investment we can make. We could take another approach. We could say, here is our plan for the future of this sector. Here's how we're going to decarbonize this sector. Here's what the future of work looks like in this sector, how Canada is going to be placed on the global map when it comes to the outputs of this sector, and really importantly, how we're going to be taking care of workers and communities as this transition happens. And I think it's that bigger picture conversation that we're still missing here in Canada. So is this part of a mission? Is this part of an overall objective to get Canada to be one of the cleanest steel exporters in the world? I haven't heard that story, and I think it would be compelling if we did hear that story, and this was just one of the pieces that was part of making that story a reality. And I think sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, finish your point. Finish your point, go ahead.
I've been touching base with a few labor allies today in the labor movement. And part of what I'm hearing here is, okay, did we get commitments from this private sector company to make sure that workers are taken care of? Is there a job guarantee? Mm-hmm. Is there a guarantee that this facility is going to stay in Sault Ste. Marie? So I think those larger social questions are really important as well.
Yeah, so on that point, the argument from Mr. McQuaid and others at Algoma is that by making this clean relative to the other steel manufacturers, that makes them more competitive globally, and that then protects and secures the long-term future of the facility and the employers that work there. So you said earlier we could judge it on emissions, but also the greening of the economy. Does that sort of fit that second metric by which you want to assess these things?
So Canada is already a leading global producer of low-carbon electric furnace steel. I think converting Algoma to being a fully electrified steelmaker will hopefully help this one facility be more competitive on the global market. And that's a good news story for this one facility that is a major anchor in Sault Ste. Marie. I think it's a good news story for that community as long as those job guarantees come along with it, which again, we have not heard about. But my question is, what does this mean for the larger industrial sector in Canada? It's good to see this one facility might have that renewed competitive advantage in a global clean economy, but will that mean that it's going to contribute to Canada having a better edge overall in the global clean economy? And another question is, will we figure out how to make sure that Canada is actually providing a market for this new, cleaner steel? Or will we just be exporting it to other parts of the world?
Yeah, there's a government that likes to build things, so perhaps it could give some preferential treatment to that. But, you said you wanted these other conversations about coming in and saying to sectors, this is our plan, this is how we want to decarbonize, this is the economy we want to build. Algoma was clearly ready for this. Are all sectors that you would need to have that conversation with, are they ready to have that conversation right now?
I think the answer to that question is pretty clearly no. So there are some sectors where that conversation is kind of being forced by global trends, and there are others where we're seeing a fair amount of reluctance to have that conversation, or a desire to kind of hold on to the status quo. Of course, we're talking about large source of emissions in Canada. Largest and growing source of emissions in Canada is our oil and gas sector. So that's something where we're going to need some really creative thinking. In the last election, and I think we're probably gearing up for another one in the near future, so it's important to remember that something that we got promised in the last election was a Just Transition Act. So this notion that we can perhaps bring some of these sectors together with workers, with governments, to talk about how these strategies and plans might be put forward. And I think, if anything, these kinds of decisions just really highlight the desperate need for more industrial strategizing in Canada to think through where those sectors are going to move to in the future and where the source of prosperity and jobs is going to come from for future Canadians.
So just circling back to this announcement today, because this larger conversation, we don't have enough time to have it all in depth. The 900,000 cars is what they say this is the equivalent of taking off the road. I mean, a few years back, an announcement like this kind of seemed like theoretical. You know what I mean? As opposed to real. I mean, this is how significant a sign of progress is this today?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think this is yet another of several reflections of the kind of new normal that we've seen recently. So, even as recently as the Biden Earth Day Summit in April, we saw these huge new commitments, not only coming from Canada, but a whole bunch of other countries that have perhaps been a little reluctant to get to that place of ambition in the past. So I do think this is now the new normal, these kinds of huge announcements. We're seeing very similar kinds of large industrial announcements in other parts of the world, similar levels of huge investment. And that's what it's going to take to make sure that we're driving those emissions down and helping ourselves mitigate the potential for future disasters like the ones that we're seeing unfold on the west coast of Canada that are absolutely heartbreaking and devastating for the people and communities that are experiencing the impacts of climate change.
Okay, Catherine Abreu, thank you so much for your time. It's great to talk to you. That's Catherine Abreu. She's the Executive Director of the Climate Action Network Canada.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.